السادة والسيدات، ندعوكم جميعا إلى القاعة الرئيسية حيث بدأت الجلسة التالية.
شغال؟ تمام.
Yes.
أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، السيدات والسادة، الحضور الكريم، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. يشرفني بداية أن أرحب بكم إلى جلسة الحوار هذه للاتحاد الدولي للنقل الطرقي. يكتسب هذا المؤتمر أهميته في ظل التطورات العالمية والتي تؤثر على سلاسل الإمداد من جهة، وأيضاً التسارع في التغير المناخي من جهة أخرى. وما يميز هذه السنة هو التركيز على المواضيع المترابطة وكيفية اعتماد الانتقال إلى الاقتصاد الدائري كمحور رئيسي للنقاشات والعروض. يتزامن أيضاً هذا المؤتمر مع الذكرى 75 لتأسيس الاتحاد الدولي للنقل الطرقي IRU، المنظمة الدولية التي تمثل قطاع النقل البري حول العالم. في هذا الإطار يشرفني أن أرحب بالخبراء الدوليين، ونتمنى أن نستمع لتجاربهم وآرائهم في كيفية التحول إلى الاقتصاد الدائري، وذلك أيضاً موائمة مع رؤية المملكة 2030. في الختام نشكر لكم حسن إصغائكم، ونتمنى أن تكون هذه الجلسة عاملاً مساعداً في دعمنا لشركائنا الاستراتيجيين وخدمة المملكة العربية السعودية والمنطقة العربية ككل. اسمحوا لي أن أبدأ بعرض بسيط عن 75 عاماً من العطاء للاتحاد الدولي للنقل الطرقي IRU، وشكراً. أرحب مرة أخرى بخبراء هذه الجلسة. دكتور مشعل، سنبدأ معك جلسة الحوار، الهيئة العامة للنقل. دكتور مشعل، بداية يعني الجميع، العالم كله اليوم يتطلع إلى المملكة العربية السعودية. هناك يعني مشاريع كبيرة الحجم، هناك مشاريع طموحة، وهناك أيضاً محور هذه الجلسة أو المؤتمر أن التحول إلى الاقتصاد الدائري. هناك مسؤوليات كبيرة عليكم لا شك كهيئة عامة للنقل، وأيضاً وزارة النقل واللوجستيات. فسؤالي لكم اليوم يعني ما هو دور الحكومات وبالأخص دوركم كهيئة عامة للنقل في دعم التحول إلى الاقتصاد الدائري في المملكة؟
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. سعيد بتواجدي اليوم معكم مع نخبة من الخبراء في قطاع النقل البري، وأرحب في السيد رادو من رئيس الآيرو عند الفريق المشارك من المنظمة، ونبارك لهم مرور 75 عام وإن شاء الله إلى مزيد من النجاحات في المستقبل. دورنا في الهيئة العامة للنقل، احنا هيئة منظمة ومشرعة لقطاع النقل البري والسككي والبحري، ودورنا الأساسي والأصيل هو تمكين المنشآت والمستفيدين والمستهلك النهائي من وضوح أو تحقيق التطلعات اللي يطمح لها، وأيضا وضوح ما يجب عليه فعله من خلال الالتزام في اللوائح، سواء كان من مقدم الخدمة أو كان من المستهلك النهائي، وضمان حقوقهم وواجباتهم والتزاماتهم على حد سواء. يمكن الهيئة العامة للنقل في النقل البري بشكل خاص، وهو محور حديثنا لهذه الجلسة، في أكثر من قطاع. نشرف على قطاع نقل البضائع، وكذلك على النقل بالحافلات ونقل السيارات الصغيرة بما يشمل التأجير وتوجيه المركبات، وكذلك ننظم قطاع البريد واللاست مايل بشتى أنواعه. ما يتعلق في الاقتصاد الدائري أو السستينابيليتي في قطاع أو الاستدامة في قطاع النقل البري، جميع اللوائح اللي أعدت في الهيئة العامة للنقل أعدت من محاور الاستدامة، وهي البيئة والاقتصاد وأيضا المنظور الاجتماعي. نهتم بشكل كبير فيما يتعلق في البيئة وخفض الانبعاثات. قبل مدة في بداية تنظيم قطاع نقل البضائع أو تطوير قطاع نقل البضائع كمثال، كان متوسط عمر الشاحنات في المملكة هي 16 سنة. عدلنا في اللوائح اللي تكون الشاحنة كالعمر التشغيلي كحد أقصى 20 سنة، وشاهدنا تأثر إيجابي في السوق، ونزل المتوسط من 16 سنة إلى 10 سنوات، وهذا يساهم في تخفيف الأثر على البيئة، وكذلك التخفيف في الحوادث اللي قد تنتج من وجود شاحنات أعمارها متقدمة، فبالتالي نضمن السلامة كذلك، وهي أيضا من أولويات عملنا في الهيئة. كذلك نعمل بشكل مستمر على عدة مبادرات، وبعض المبادرات أيضا مسقطة من الاستراتيجية الوطنية للنقل والخدمات اللوجستية، اللي نعمل على تنفيذ مبادراتها، وفيها العديد من المبادرات اللي مهتمة في الجانب البيئي. وكذلك عملنا مؤخرا على خطة شاملة لنقل البضائع وتحديد الممرات الأساسية في نقل البضائع والمتوقع نموها خلال السنوات القادمة، لنعمل من خلال تلك المبادرة إلى استحداث مبادرات أخرى تساهم في الحد من البيئة وأيضا رفع الكفاءة للقطاع. كذلك عملنا على عدة مبادرات أخرى مثل تنظيم دخول المدن. في السابق كان هناك صعوبة في الازدحام المروري في مداخل مدينة الرياض كمثال، وكذلك جدة، والموانئ اللي اليوم أصبحت في وسط المدينة مثل جدة ومثل مدينة الدمام. من خلال إعداد بوابة وتنسيق مع الجهات ذات العلاقة، يعني جهود كبيرة تمت بشكل تكاملي مع جهات عديدة، حددنا فيها مسارات قاصدة ومسارات عابرة تمكن الناقلين من نقل البضائع بكفاءة، وأيضا بعدم إيقاف الشاحنة أحيانا في المداخل مما يتسبب في ضرر بيئي عند إيقافها لفترة معينة، أو كذلك عند وجودها في مناطق مزدحمة. كذلك عملنا على مبادرة أخرى ساهمت في التقليل من الأثر البيئي بنسبة 25%، وهي المقطرات المزدوجة، ولأول مرة أطلقت هذا العام ولله الحمد. وكذلك نعمل عدة مبادرات أخرى ستساهم بشكل مباشر أو غير مباشر للحد من التلوث البيئي الذي في دوره سيساهم في الاقتصاد الدائري.
شكرا جزيلا دكتور مشعل. ويعني تطلعاتكم تتقاطع، استطيع القول، مع يعني برنامجنا وخطة عملنا في الاتحاد الدولي للنقل، وسنعود لك بعد قليل، ولكن نتطلع قدما للتعاون بشكل أكبر مع الهيئة العامة للنقل للوصول إلى الأهداف المرجوة في المملكة. إن شاء الله. From there, I will turn to you, Iyad, DB Shankar, a leading logistics provider, more than 150 years of activities. You are quite active in supply chain management, in air and land freight, and then contract logistics. Iyad, when we were preparing for the panel, I remember the first point we came to that is how to go to sustainability, how to reach circular economy where we don't have much control on many areas in the supply chain. For example, empty miles, trucks waiting time at the borders, all this kind of challenges. They are there, but how to tackle them? So my question to you is, what are your thoughts? And how do you foresee a circular economy in the supply chain and transport industry?
Okay. Thank you for having us in this panel. Now, if we think about the characteristics of the nature of the economy, most of the economy, if we exclude the oil and gas economy, it is depending on import more than it depending on export, which has created a lot of opportunities for several segments and market like retail, automotive, consumer goods and e-commerce to come and have attraction in this region, which in reality is creating a loop, which is, but with the current situation, we can think about it that it is very ambitious to think of circular economy at this stage if we don't have the right regulation. For example, one of the items that come into my mind is the free movement of trucks has restriction in this region when it comes mainly to the cross-border. So trucks, in most of the cases, are allowed to go back to their original country. At the same time, there is still no clear or not enough regulation when it comes to eco-friendly trucks and vehicles. It is limited only to the use of domestic need, and still, for example, the cross-border still there is no clear regulation around it. But we as industry, we have the will to work more into the sustainability. I will give you one example. The initiative that we worked with the IRU and the TIR, on top of it helped to facilitate the trade and reduce the time of the truck waiting at the border, it helps to reduce the CO2 emission by reducing the ideal time of the trucks. So we want to work more into these regulations that will help us to eliminate waste and create a very circular economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Iyad. And yes, it's a pleasure to see. Sorry. Yes, when we work on the TIR initiative, actually, TIR is 3 years old practically in Saudi Arabia, but we can see that not only facilitating trade, but also having an impact on CO2 emission. We will come back to you, Iyad, with more questions, and from there maybe I will turn to Jonas. I hope I'm saying it right. Jonas, you represent ALSA, a leading operator in the passenger transport sector. You are based in Spain, but you are practically active all around Europe, and recently you have been expanding to the Middle East and North Africa. Maybe we can hear more about that. In the same direction, Jonas, about idling time, empty miles, all this kind of things. The question is, how do you see this facilitated from a passenger point of view?
So first, I'm trying to build a little bit on my colleague point. I think that as transport operators, we are the first movers in new technology that allows to reduce CO2 emissions. Basically, to give a clear idea of what's happening in Spain, generally speaking. In our urban fleet, we are running 33% of the total fleet between eco and zero emissions fleet, whilst the margin of adoption between private users has not trespassed already 4.5%. So this is a clear idea on how, by transporting more and more people or more and more goods, we are able or capable of investing and moving first into this gray area when people do not have the knowledge of buying electric vehicles, hydrogen, gas. So how to move out, how to decarbonize. In that sense, I think as private operators that have the knowledge and have the resources to investigate, we have the obligation to do it. But in this case, I think this is most specific to public transport operators. As our contracts run for 10 years, our investment is, we can say, locked for 10 years. So through the authority, we have to find the right channels and the incentives to move forward as technology is being disrupted or creating disruption every shorter periods than 10 years. This is part for this, sorry. So, customer-wise, we have the point of digitalization. How to say, passenger transport in urban services have been disrupted by Uber, Bolt, Cabify, you name it. All these platforms have done something that the public transport companies have not managed yet. That is understanding that data is differential. If we get to understand how this data is being used, how to optimize our empty miles, idle time of the fleet, all this process reduces the CO2 footprint. And this is how we have to invest ourselves in this kind of not only customer experience, but that final approach. I don't know if that answered your question.
Perfect, thank you very much. And actually, maybe we'll touch base on that later, but that's why the IRU developed the Roadmasters program, is to help exactly in the risk assessment and then the right decision in the right place. We'll come back to that maybe in a while. But from now, I will turn to my colleague, Vincent. First, welcome to Saudi Arabia. This is your first visit, and I'm sure it won't be the last.
Salam alaikum.
Vincent, we have this particular situation of a public-private partnership. We defend the interest of the private sector as IRU, but also we help governments in adopting international standards. So in that context, and then when we look at it today, my question to you is, how the IRU, through its various activities, contribute to make the road transport more sustainable?
We do have many activities to make road transport more sustainable, and focusing mainly on more efficiency, being more safer, emitting less. I'm going to use two examples. One is referring to what Mr. Ayad said is about TIR. TIR is at RU, we are managing TIR for more than 75 years. Now it's the longest public-private partnership. And Saudi Arabia and other neighboring countries have embraced using TIR to facilitate trade. And when you look at the benefits of TIR, what does it bring? It brings, we mentioned that you reduce border waiting times, adding times by more than 70%. So that goes for everyone. It's good for shippers, it's good for transport operators, it's good for drivers. It's less cost, it's less CO2 emissions. And also it's good for the states because we ensure that the national customs receive the tax and duties. And that's why we are, our president mentioned that this morning, we are issuing 50 billion a year of guarantees to ensure that all the national customs that are part of these systems receive their tax and duties. And it's secure. So there is a lot of benefits for trade, but also for the private sector, for the public sector to use TIR. And then I'm going to use the second example is when you share and bring best practices and international standards. And when you do a transportation, you need to make it safe. When you subcontract, when you hire drivers, you better be sure that your drivers is sufficiently skilled when getting on the road. And this is what I would say our program Roadmasters provide. And it's even more true when you're just transporting dangerous goods, like hydrocarbon. And that's why you need to have a legal framework to manage all this. How serious, you can imagine how serious it is to have an accident involving dangerous goods on people, on environment. So you need to have the right framework, and thanks to the work being done in Saudi Arabia and neighboring countries implementing this international convention on ADR, managing dangerous goods, is good for everybody. And what needs to be true is to make it happen and to be a success, you need to have the right training program. You need to have the right training centers being trained and accredited. You need to have solutions to assess whether the drivers, before getting on the road, have the sufficient skills to be on the road. And you need to adapt your proceedings and procedures, vehicle inspections, for example. And actually, this is what we do. We help, we support this kind of implementation of best practices and international standards.
Thank you very much, Vincent. We'll come back to you with more details about our agenda for sustainability and decarbonization. Dennis, welcome to our panel. Thank you for being with us today. We have been hearing the government, private sector, IRU as an international organization. Now it's time to have more the research side of the story. VCare Academy, you are a global leader in research and education in the field of value chain. So here, the question to you is, I would say, the same. How do you foresee from a research perspective that concept of reverse logistics, empty miles, and then idling time in the sustainability area?
I'm so sorry. I'm having a very hard time hearing you. Can you repeat that one more time?
What is your view on the reverse logistics, and how do you foresee this form in a circular economy perspective?
Now I understand you. Thank you. So reverse logistics is a very up-and-coming topic, especially when you look at carbon footprinting and measuring the overall impact of a product or a service. So what's interesting about reverse logistics is currently that is not measured. It's when you do a carbon footprint, you actually follow a rule called the polluter pays principle, where the first user of the material pays for all the impacts. So imagine a bottle, and the first manufacturer of it is going to environmentally soak up those impacts. At the end of life, when it comes back around and is recycled, that's your reverse logistics, but that essentially is not accounted for at this time. So it's almost free, and it comes around and then it becomes processed and used as a raw material again. When you look at that and you look at the way in which carbon footprinting is being used as a regulatory and as a measurement, we have to be really careful with reverse logistics that we do a couple of key things. As we're designing these systems, they need to be obviously as energy efficient and the least amount of carbon input to them, because when we do catch up and start using that accountability, we're going to raise the footprint of products. We also need to make sure that it is very accessible and that there are no barriers, meaning legislative or regional barriers to that network as you're designing it. So we want to make as less friction as possible so that it can be easy to implement into the circular economy system. So in the research, it's creating that model and designing it with all of those three in mind.
Thank you very much, Dennis, and we'll come back to know more about your future agenda on the research side. عودة لكم دكتور مشعل. يعني استمعنا إلى الخبراء وإلى ما تم التحدث عنه من قبل القطاع الخاص، الاتحاد الدولي للنقل، الأبحاث والمشاريع. سؤالي لكم الآن يعني في ظل توجهكم نحو التنمية المستدامة وطبعا تحت مظلة رؤية المملكة 2030، كيف يتبلور دوركم كقطاع خاص في رفع الوعي حول موضوع النقل المستدام؟
طبعا الهيئة العامة للنقل تعمل على استراتيجية للنقل البري، وهذه الاستراتيجية منصبة من الاستراتيجية الوطنية للنقل والخدمات اللوجستية اللي يندرج تحتها تقريبا 6 استراتيجيات قطاعية. ومن ضمن أهداف الاستراتيجية أنه يكون في نقل مستدام كمحور أساسي لاستراتيجية النقل البري، وكذلك أنه يكون في عمل لما يتعلق في CO2 emission reduction في المستقبل فيما يتعلق في جميع وسائل النقل البري. نستهدف مثلا فيما يتعلق في نقل الشاحنات أو النقل بالشاحنات للبضائع تقريبا تخفيض الامتي رانينج أو الشاحنات اللي تعود فارغة من 50% إلى 70% تقريبا. وأيضا نطمح أنه يكون فيه مساهمة بشكل كبير لاستخدام التقنيات الحديثة مثل استخدام الشاحنات الكهربائية وشاحنات ذاتية القيادة اللي الآن في دول كثيرة تعمل بشكل يعني مطبقة بشكل تجريبي، وإن شاء الله أنه نطبقها في المملكة. وأطلقت عدة شاحنات في المملكة كهربائية، وسنساهم بشكل فعال مع شركائنا من القطاع الخاص لتفعيلها بشكل أكبر بإذن الله. كذلك في عمل فيما يتعلق في الشراكة مع القطاع الخاص. اليوم الهيئة العامة للنقل ممثلة في مجلس الشراكة مع القطاع الخاص، مجلس الشراكة اللوجستي مع القطاع الخاص. نعمل بشكل مستمر مع الغرف التجارية. عملنا من بداية السنة إلى اليوم أكثر من 20 لقاء مع القطاع الخاص بما يتعلق مثلا في نقل البضائع، ومستمرين في العمل لأننا بالنهاية شركاء ونعمل لتمكينهم وتحقيق تطلعاتهم وكذلك تطلعات المستهلك النهائي. أيضا هناك عمل فيما يتعلق في شراكة مع جهات أخرى كمؤسسات البحثية، وأيضا نعمل عدة مبادرات مع برنامج الوطني للصناعة والخدمات اللوجستية ندلب لعمل بحوث متخصصة فيما يتعلق في الخفض الانبعاثات. وكذلك حاليا نعمل على لوائح لكفاءة الطاقة وحماية البيئة لأنشطة النقل البري والسككي والبحري كذلك. فهذه جميعا ستساهم بإذن الله في الحد من التلوث البيئي بإذن الله مستقبلا بإذن الله.
شكرا مرة أخرى دكتور مشعل. وتعقيبا على كلامكم، يعني في الاتحاد الدولي للنقل أطلقنا بالعام 2021 ما يعرف بالميثاق الأخضر أو الجرين كومباكت، وهو مبادرة للمساعدة بالوصول إلى الحياد الكربوني بالعام 2050. سيكون لنا تفاصيل أكثر عن هذا الموضوع مع زميلي فينسنت. شكرا مرة أخرى. وأنتقل I will go to you Iyad again. From your long history of working in this region, and when we were talking, you mentioned that things have changed actually in this region. 20 years ago, it wasn't like today. So would you tell us more about that, and how important is the role of policy and regulations in shaping that agenda of the future in sustainability and circular economy?
Yes. Now, if we look into land transport in general, we should not look to it as just a transportation. We just need to think about it as a whole ecosystem. And this land transportation is very fragmented. So in some countries, there is no one single entity that owns the whole end-to-end transportation. And on the other level, there are too many stakeholders involved in the transportation, between truck owners, drivers, customs, shipper, consignee, local regulations. So this has created a need that the information need to be processed fast. So on us as industry, we have invested significantly in technology to make sure that the technology is meeting the expectation. And currently what we are doing as best practice, we have created 2 control towers to help us manage our business. So maybe 10 years ago, we need to keep an army of people in every location to manage the transportation. But now with the easy regulation and the technology, we are able to have 2 control towers, one in Dammam, Saudi Arabia, and one in the UAE. At the same time, if we look on what happened in the kingdom in terms of driving the land transportation through the الهيئة العامة للنقل by enforcing or the initiative المبادرات in terms of فسح, in terms of GPS, the weight limitation, has organized the industry and forced all the countries around Saudi to move into this direction. So if I look to the way we are doing transportation now compared to what we were doing 10 or 15 years ago, things by far is better. But I'm still very optimistic that the future will be better, and with what's going on and all these initiatives coming into this direction, and with the partnership we have it with the government and the IRU. Thank you.
Thank you, Iyad. And yes, I agree with you. It's no coincidence that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia gained 17th place in the ranking of the World Bank for the LPI, the Logistics Performance Index. It's exactly backed by strong regulations in favor of the business community. Jonas, coming back to you, you have been mentioning that you invested a lot in technology in terms of like optimizing your operations. So the question is, what advice would you give to the audience on the use of technology in the business of public transportation?
So here we have to understand that there is a 360 environment. It's not only the end point that can be the customer, but it's how we become sustainable, so how circular economies can be applied to this. And it's not easy to say that circular economies have a full place in transport, because it's not as easy to understand as there is no product that can be looped at the end. But we have to understand, for example, the facility management. In our facilities, we reuse the water that we for cleaning the buses. In average, one bus per day in urban transport needs 400 liters of water. Out of this procedure of recycling this water, we get up to 90% of the water recycled. All our facilities are powered 100% from renewable energies. There is many things that can be done. We have reduced 25% of the hazardous waste that we have in the depots. We have a reduction, even if the fleet has grown, but a 20% reduction of total waste out of our depots. So it's not only on fleet or drivers that you mentioned before. On drivers, we have, by training the driver is the intangible part of the full operation. And by itself, by training and doing different processes like the Aero Roadmasters and supporting them with software that is preventive in the fuel consumption, we get to reduce up to 7% of the total fuel consumption in different operations. So there is like many things in this change. Before, as they were mentioned, close the loop. We have many inputs that can be measured. Digitalization can go through IoT, AI, digital twins for maintenance. So we can simulate and run as many scenarios as we want before putting something in place or capturing data that will help us make those decisions. Like data-driven decisions is, at the end of the day, good decisions.
Agree with you, Jonas, and it's all about efficiency, if I summarize what you have said. You have been actively working in the region recently, and then you have a partnership with SAPTCO that you are now working on. So we look forward to the expansion of your activities in the region and how the region would benefit from your European experience. That will be knowledge sharing, very important for everyone involved. Vincent, coming back to you now, we have mentioned, briefly, I mentioned the Green Compact, but the question is, maybe the audience would like to know, what is the IRU approach towards decarbonization of the road transport industry today?
So our approach is aimed to be pragmatic. And when I say pragmatic, is to how we can leverage on solutions that exist today. And the approach also must be well-to-wheel if you want to reduce effectively CO2 emissions. So what we did is we started 2 years ago a project called the Green Compact. And the goal of this Green Compact is to draw a roadmap having a set of measures to reach net zero by 2050. And then to monitor and follow on the implementation of those measures. So the issue is quite difficult in the sense that we need to to meet with the transport demand, which is obviously increasing over years and over years, while at the same time reducing the energy consumption. So we look at different ways to decarbonize. We looked at having more efficient vehicles, so looking at having better tires, working on the aerodynamics, but also if you're using more Euro 6 standard trucks instead of Euro 4. I mean, all these measures, you can already save up to 20% of CO2 emissions. So that's what was for, we looked at vehicle efficiency. We looked also at logistics efficiency. So carbon consolidation or the usage of eco trucks, these 25 meters long trucks, which definitely can help you improve the tonnage transported per vehicle on the road. And already with those measures, you could also add up 20% CO2 emissions. Trainings, obviously. Trainings, it's a no-brainer. It's regular trainings, eco-driving trainings. That's also a key factor where you could reach also up to 10 to 50%. When you look at all these three measures, you can already save more than 50% of CO2, already with existing solutions. We looked at collective transport, obviously. It's a way also to shift cars from buses and coaches. And we looked at alternative fuel. Having many options for transport companies, the supply chain to decarbonize. And we realized that this analysis must be regional. All regions won't have the same options available at the same price, with the right infrastructure and so on. So obviously, electric vehicles will take a large part of many transportations, but we look at biofuels and hydrogen. And when you think about hydrogen, with the ambition of Saudi Arabia to become the top supplier of hydrogen, definitely it will have an impact and increase attractiveness of a hydrogen powertrain in the region and specifically in the kingdom. But most important is when a company decides to invest in decarbonizing, they look at what? They look at whether it fits the usage. They look at the total cost of ownership of the investment. They look at having visibility about the supply of energy, and they look at the infrastructure. So I think this is where it's important that we discuss many times about private and public sectors. This is, I think, important that together, private and public sectors discuss and collectively find the best ways to implement those existing solutions to decarbonize, whether it's a subsidized, whether it's infrastructure to put in place, all these should be worked together. And I think this is where RU would be definitely part of it and a very good supporter of such discussions.
Fully agree with you, Vincent, and we all agree that we need to reach carbon neutrality by 2050, but as you rightly mentioned, is a collective effort of everyone involved. So we need all to pull in the right direction, and the RU will always be there to play that role of putting everyone together on the same table. Dennis, we will close this panel with you. We would like to know about, since we were talking about the future, so what will be the future agenda of VCare in terms of research? And then how do you think this will shape also the road transport industry in the term of sustainability?
Okay. So I would like to agree with everybody on here. I think that there are solutions, there is technologies, we've got route optimization, we've got ability to reduce emissions from idling of in our logistics network. And so the pieces of the puzzle are there. We have all of these technology. We are not short of technology or pieces. What we are short of is a complete puzzle. And how do we get to that goal, whether it's reduced emissions or idling time? And so our focus really is on that systematic way to put tools together that will give you repeatable results every quarter, every year, as you drive towards Vision 2030 or as you are going towards your individual targets. So it's that creation of a system of tools that are able to be used in an industry independent of what that industry is, so that you are able to drive your results that you're looking for. So.
The best for the last, Dennis. Thank you very much. الحضور الكريم، شكرا جزيلا لاستماعكم، وبهذا نأتي إلى نهاية هذه الجلسة، ونتأمل أن نكون قد أغنينا هذا الحوار، ونلقاكم قريبا في المستقبل إن شاء الله. شكرا جزيلا.
شكرا جزيلا أستاذ رامي قاروط على إدارة هذه الجلسة، وشكرا للمتحدثين. هلا وسهلا. التالي عرض تقديمي محوره حول تمهيد الطريق أمام سلسلة إمداد خضراء في أرامكو السعودية.